Hey, I'm James Introcaso, and that creepy music means you're listening to a new ad for DSPN's new Dungeons & Dragons actual play, The Demon Plague. I am the DM for Rudy Basso, Lauren Urban, TK Johnson, and Robert Aducci as they bring their characters through a dark fantasy world. I wrote this adventure with John Four, and now you can listen to us play through this adventure on the podcasting app of your choice, or you can watch us on YouTube or Twitch. You can find out more about the Demon Plague at Don'tSplitThePodcastNetwork.com. This is Tabletop Babble. I'm James Introcaso. Today on the show, we have DC. They are an amazing game designer who is responsible for Mutants in the Night, Plot Armor, and some unannounced projects with Wizards of the Coast. I really liked getting to sit down with DC and discuss their background in game design and everything that they have been working on and just how they relate to storytelling through games. It was a mind-blowing conversation. So, let me blow your mind by playing it for you. Here it is. Okay, everybody, now I am here with a giant in the gaming community and gamosphere, DC. Welcome to Tabletop Babble. It is awesome to have you here. For people who don't know, who are you and what do you do in the world of tabletop games?
Hello, I make games. I am a game designer. Well, actually, I don't really make too many of my own games these days, but I'm working on a lot of other people's games.
I know that feeling.
Right now, I'm mostly focused on working with Wizards of the Coast on Dungeons & Dragons, doing contract work and stuff, which has been just absolutely mind-bogglingly fun.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty cool to see you in that space because I really enjoy the work that you have released and done on your own. And it's no surprise everybody wants to work with you because you have a lot of really great ideas about game design and about story and kind of how the two and two go together. I see you talking about that a lot on Twitter and making observations and connecting the two in ways that I have not seen other people say, like, when you think about these two things, when you watch a lot of movies, you see people, this was something you were talking about last week, you were watching movies and you said there's this idea of like people focus a lot on their past and not so much on the future, right? And I definitely want to get into that and some other things, but how do you think about games and story and their connection when it comes to RPGs?
That's my favorite thing, maybe ever, because to me, it was kind of an experience of me going through a lot of different areas of interest in my life and seeing how they're all technically the same thing. I'm a very meta person. Like when I was younger, I was very into philosophy until I realized that's where mean people hang out.
Oh, no.
No, philosophers are cool, some of them. But that just kind of like, I've always been in that mind state of like, what am I doing and why? I'm a very that kind of person. Like, oh, I'm doing this stuff. It seems really cool. I'm having fun. Why am I doing it? What is it? How does this relate to these other things that are seemingly disconnected from each other? Until, as a designer, I had to find out like what mechanics are functioning in these different places. Like, where am I getting these similar rewards? Over the years, just from having a very strange life of moving around a lot and being into a lot of hobbies and being friends with a lot of very different people, I've just seen that like, oh, well, if someone's really interested in this, like, for example, fighting games was a huge part of my life for 3 or 4 years. It's like people who love fighting games so much absolutely like will dive into that as their form of communication and this sort of stories that they like to hear and see progress. How does that have anything to do with tabletop games? Or when I listen to a piece of music and it feels like that music is communicating to me this like emotional journey, right? And that's storytelling too. How does that relate to all these other things? So I just sit and think about this stuff all the time.
Yeah, and it's obvious from the way you talk about this. I follow you on Twitter, and I get a lot of the great ideas that you are thinking about and the connections you're seeing coming across. How did you find RPGs? Like, when did you first start playing them, and what were you playing? Like, how did this come to be part of your life?
So, video games were the absolute start. Some of my earliest memories. I've been an RPG player of like tabletop role-playing games since I was 15, I want to say. And it was because I had a crush on a girl and she wanted to play D&D, and I was like, sure, I'll play whatever you want. She took me to this room where this particular teacher would let people hang out after school and like at lunch and stuff and do the nerdy stuff in safety. So there were people who played like Yu-Gi-Oh! And people who would be playing some D&D. I'm not 100% sure if I rolled a fighter or a rogue first, but it was one of the two. And my first roll was a D20 as I tried to scale a wall that was impossible to scale, but I rolled a 20, and so I did it. And then from then on, I was pretty juiced. I was like, I can do things that are impossible, and at the same time, it's rare enough for me to be like, whoa, this is intense. The teacher, she had 3 sons, one of which was 1 year older than me, and one of which was 1 year younger than me. And they lived a few blocks away from the high school that I went to. And so we ended up all going to their house. They're the kind of the house on the block that's like, hey, all the kids can come over and like play with all of our games, and we have D&D, and the dad likes to cook, and there's all the movies and stuff. They had a big old TV, like very welcoming house. I went there and I started playing, and we just kept playing for a lot of years, never making it past like 3 to 5 sessions of anyone's individual campaign. And we never played any D&D adventures. I still actually have it to this day. We just kept rotating around this table of like 7 or 8 people, all being like, okay, well, now it's your turn to DM, and it's your turn to DM, it's your turn to DM, and we'd make our own stories. And it was around the time of 3.0 and 3.5 and a lot of like supplementary material, and we just put it all together and do whatever we wanted to.
That sounds fun. That reminds me of my own childhood, definitely passing the GM hat around and going to that one house in the neighborhood where you always played, and just sounds great. So while you were, you started out doing that and you've been playing games, at what point did you decide, I think this is something I could do and I could make some money while I'm doing it?
That's an interesting story. Because it's a sad story. Mental health, kind of content warning stuff. I've struggled with mental health as long as I can remember. I didn't know I was like depressed until I knew. And like I started dealing with anxiety and had all these problems because while I was having a pretty cool time running around enjoying all these different facets of life, I was extremely poor, and I was living on my own and like moving from house to house, finding jobs, not those jobs not working out, or like all sorts of stuff. I was just living as a nomad for many years, probably like a full 10 years, like moving around. At one point, 2 years ago, almost coming up on my anniversary, I ended up in the hospital for suicidal ideation for like the 3rd time in my life. Real tough stuff, but at that point, after like having gone to doctors and taking medications and just the long process that can be, I was just in such a bad spot that when I went into the hospital this time, it was very different from the other times, as I like had a goal in my mind. I was like, I'm going to figure out how to like live life in a way that is me enjoying the things that I'm doing and like my goals and all that kind of stuff, rather than just trying to survive all the time. Because I was always trying to survive when it came to money and jobs and all that sort of stuff, I would throw myself into creative work, just hardcore, whatever it happened to be at the time. When I was in the hospital, I was just like planning, like meticulously, just figuring out in my head, like, okay, so if I'm going to live life, what does that mean? How do I what do I enjoy? What do I want to dedicate myself to? How do I balance all of these like life factors? It was me like designing my life from the ground up. I completely started over. I got to this point where I had a really strong like foundational core mechanics. I was like, I'm going to use all of these healthy things that I've learned over the many years and all this sort of stuff. Like I came to my doctors and to the people who were doing classes with like, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm looking at, here's all the stuff. I've studied all the things, I remember it all, like, let's rock. The funny thing was that in that process called a 5150, you can be held for up to 72 hours, and then after that, you can leave. But most people, want to stay for at least the 3 days if they're, within their mind to do so. They can release you early if you're doing really well. And what's really funny is that the second day that I was in there was it might have been the beginning of the third day. It was going to be a Thursday, and I was watching Critical Role season 1 at the time, so I was like, oh, I totally forgot, because I wasn't, of course, thinking about that at all. Hey, I'm doing great. Can I leave early tomorrow morning so I can go watch Critical Role? They're like, yeah, sure, you're doing fine. See you later. Hopefully not.
Wow.
So I went and I watched Critical Role on Thursday, and I went back to my D&D campaign on Friday. And I had so many creative ideas about stuff that I wanted to do with D&D. And I had my DM, who was this person who had a really good person to bounce stuff off of. You bounce it off them, and then when it comes back, it's a little cleaner. Actually, together, the first thing that we made is we made a 5.0 shaman class that was just super, just experimental. You could use potions. You'd have to go and collect different items that were more tied to the more witchy sort of description of items. And it's like, oh, well, you need to go and find this, for this particular potion, you have to have the handkerchief of a lover's scorned or something like that,
That is a pretty amazing story. A lot of people, when I ask them that question, right, about how did you get into writing role playing games, I sort of fell into it. I had stuff, I was sharing it online, and you don't often hear people that got very determined and made a plan. And I am certainly glad that you are here with us and that you're part of this community too, but also that you're just part of the world in a sort of overall sense. I'm glad that you're part of it. That has seemed to carry you, in the world of role-playing games and tabletop role-playing games. You have done some incredible stuff, and I want to start with Mutants in the Night. So maybe you could talk about this. This is one of your games that you were talking about, that you created, that is original. So what is Mutants in the Night?
Mutants in the Night was my answer to the situation of not being able to manipulate D&D in the way that I wanted to. Because the second project that I worked on with D&D was messing with gender, race, and cultural background. Those are the things I was like, damn, I love D&D. Really wish I could fix those things.
Sure.
So
yeah.
I worked with that stuff, and I made a really cool project. But at the end, I was like, this isn't it. Because if you're trying to deconstruct something, you're going from the top, and then you have to get all the way back down to the bottom and then try and rebuild it and see what fits and what doesn't. And that's just, I'm a singular person at that time with very little experience, not really knowing what I'm doing. I'm a baby of a human being. And so I wanted to make a game that just sort of understood my perspective on marginalization and on community and how it feels to exist in the present state of just how things are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I couldn't imagine what like my fantasy was. I thought to myself, like, what's my fantasy? What's the thing I want to sit down and relax and escape from all this stuff? What's that? And I just didn't have an answer for a really long time. And so the things that I had pieced together from other experiences like D&D, that one of the things I loved about D&D is that I had the power of control and choice. But in most settings, when you come down to the actual, like, oh, well, is this Tolkien-esque? Is this sci-fi? There are things that you can manipulate and things that you can't. There's always these lines whether you can see them or not. So it's like, oh, well, you can go ahead and slay every dragon in the land and like become king of the elves, but all of the core species are still going to exist. Time isn't going to move forward mechanically to where you have computers and stuff, you know, like there's always limitations. It's just the ones that we see and the ones that we don't. So I was like, in this game, I have to make my life and all of the conditions of my life and then role play it as best I can. Um,
Wow.
so the first thing that I had to figure out, and it actually took me like a full solid month of like pacing, I was pacing up and down stairs and around my apartment. Like I really don't remember what at least 3 of those weeks were like, other than walking around and thinking a lot. I was like, how do I make it so that players can inhabit my life and the lives of other marginalized people without being like, oh, well, I'm putting on the skin suit of someone else. Like that's uncomfortable for everyone, and that doesn't teach anything. So I was like, wait a second. Stan Lee used like mutants, and then my brain clicked and was like, hey, Stan Lee used mutants. Oh yeah, I could do that. That's perfect. There's this range that exists within mutants that allow people to self-insert as much as they want to, as much as they need to, and they can set up boundaries in a way to where I've had players who are like, well, I don't feel like I'm very marginalized. Like, okay, well, it's your choice whether to have your mutation to be extremely physical, very visible, or you can be someone who has very little visibility and has more passability outside of mutant areas where there are quote unquote normal humans. Um, you can have that experience of of that feeling of not feeling something enough and being next to, parallel to, or even a part of a community of people who, just like someone who is a trans person of color, they might be more visible to the world in the way that they present and the way that they are. Um, but two can exist side by side and still have similar struggles and have completely different struggles. Um, the whole point, though, is that we're still all contained within the same system. We have the same issues. We're all in the game of Mutants of the Night. You're all in this blocked off section of a major city where they've just thrown every mutant they could inside, and the product of that is the culture has changed. The food that is made there changes. What people often, when picking a city that they know, that they grew up in, or it's well known, like New York, they'll be like, oh, well, of course, the part of the city that was blocked off was such and such. And because it was here and sports exist, and sports are really big in this city, that the mutant sports team must be like a really popular thing inside and outside of the mutant safe zones where everybody stays. Like, people fill in all of these blanks about their own lives and how the world and the things that people who have more power and control, how those things that are chosen, those avenues which we can take in order to be like seen and recognized and to like feel good about ourselves, or even just to make enough money to take care of our families, whatever it happens to be, how those avenues reflect back on us and the people that we're hanging out with, because our communities are really diverse. Like, we're all hanging out together and we're all very different, but the things that we share are all like, you know what, you and me, we are both fans of this team, or like maybe we both played basketball in high school, or maybe we both felt like really big outcasts and have been really close friends ever since, even though we lived on two different parts of town and now we're both mutants, or whatever it happens to be. There's so many avenues for people to put their life's experience of having a diverse group of people and yet a similar issue for most people, poverty, just to like bring us together and experience our different backgrounds and like give us a safe opportunity to explore that with each other.
Hey, everybody, just wanted to take a quick break to let you know that this episode of Tabletop Babble is brought to you by Kobold Press and the Deep Magic Kickstarter. It's going on right now. Right now, as we speak, it is happening. And guess what? Guess what? It is funded to the extreme. To the extreme, it's already been funded. They are blowing through stretch goals, and you can get all kinds of new schools of magic, more than 575 new and compiled spells by the best in the business, including Wizards of the Coast staffers and A-list freelancers. In this supplement, you'll find new magic schools, sorceress origins, warlock patrons, feats, spells, magic items, and more. Go check it out at koboldpress.com and blow up your magic options for 5th edition with Deep Magic. Oh, did I mention it's all play tested and amazing? Because it is. Go check it out right now, koboldpress.com, the Deep Magic Kickstarter. Let's get back to the babble. It's really fascinating that this idea of bringing yourself for your character into your game, right? I think is one, you don't see games, you don't see them discouraging that necessarily, but you don't really see them always encouraging that. This idea of like, hey, see if you can experience sort of life and have a safe way to handle some of what's going on and tell a story with these issues, I think is like a really interesting and unique design goal for games. And at the same time, I think a lot of games, we're trying to get there, right? We're trying to get to the heart of the story and the heart of emotion, and we don't necessarily come right out and say that. We say like, oh, we want to tell a fun action story with this game, or oh, we want to tell a story where you can kill dragons, which is good. There's nothing wrong with those games, but it is interesting to listen to you talk about, like, you started with not just the story, but the humanity of it, right? This game about playing mutants, you started with the, how are we the same? What are the struggles that people are going through as a design goal, which I really like. And I think speaks to sort of your design ethos, that you are looking at ways to tell stories and deconstructing the ways we tell stories and bringing that into gaming in a great way. What was it about those design goals that made you decide to use Forged in the Dark, which is the Blades in the Dark system for Mutants in the Night?
Honestly, the best part of it all is that there's stress and trauma, and stress is the major player in how we both push ourselves and are punished. It's the tool that we have as people to, let's say, we're all human beings. We all have stats, and they're if you were to Dragon Ball Z it up and Raditz comes down and scans across, it's like, oh, well, you all have an average of 5. Doesn't really matter how much up and down you go. The thing that pushes us up and the thing that pulls us down, besides like actual disabilities and illnesses aside, it allows, stress is the thing that allows us to go, okay, well, I need to be a little bit stronger right now, like physically, or I have a test due in the morning. I need to push through this night. It's your not completely balanced way of empowering yourself in the real world. And just like how me being someone who, especially at that point, really understanding mental health and how stress can affect you, going, hey, everyone, y'all understand stress. I'm going to make sure that this is a really highlighted and key point, not only within what Forged in the Dark games already do, because it's really well done, but also incorporated into the thing that I felt was very necessary to have which was powers that generally just work and give you that, hey, everything sucks, but at least I can X sort of factor within the game. Even there, still, stress exists, and people have never had an issue with it existing there. So it's just sensical. It's very easy for people to drop in and go, oh, that makes sense. I'm stressed right now.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I love the Forged in the Dark system, and I think it was such a smart move for this. And then you have this other game that is a one-player role-playing game, which you don't see a lot of. It's called Plot Armor. Let's talk about Plot Armor, because I think this is a really, really fun game that can, I think, not only help people, have a good time, but also help people become game designers if they play it.
Yeah, that's like really good gaming to me. Is that when a game helps you to become a game designer, and sometimes that can be in a positive way, and that sometimes that can be in a negative way, but both still kind of lead to this great thing. Plot Armor was a just absolutely lightning in a bottle. There's a sad mech jam going on. If y'all aren't familiar, itch.io, there are a lot of tabletop games being experimented with there, and people will make these themed jams where everyone makes a small game that they contribute to this jam, and the thing that they share is this theme. Sometimes people will put them all together and sell them as a bundle. And sometimes, more than often, it's just this great exercise for especially new designers to, in a very low pressure situation, go, hey, I'm going to make this game that's like a page, and I did the thing. Now nobody look at me. I'm ashamed, because that's that's how it is when you're starting out. Probably just forever, but it was 2 days before submissions were about to close, and for those who follow me on Twitter, you might have noticed that some of my best tweets are early in the morning or late at night. Um, when I wake up, I have some of my greatest ideas, and I also get the news, and so the things that come out of me right after, like very pure and only slightly processed. I saw that there were 2 days left, and I was like, oh, tweet, tweet, tweet. I really wish I could do that. Tweet, all right, what if this idea was a thing? Tweet, I should go make it. Tweet, and then I made it. In an hour and a half, I wrote out this game, and Plot Armor just, as a complete game and as a complete product, was like, just like existed in my brain as soon as I thought of it. Like every single little detail outside of the layout, which was all just the grace of having a great layout designer. It was all the perfect storm because I watched tons of anime. I really like how the mech genre is about how painful war is, and how, although there are all these cool robot things going on, that it doesn't change how much it hurts. And how in those spaces, when you go to the extremes, I picked all sorts of conflicts in that game based on the different sorts of metaphors that a lot of mecha anime use for different feelings and overcoming different things. So it was just, hey, you're going to crack open a journal and you are going to write out first a sort of prologue. It's like, hey, I'm very excited to go off into the world as a pilot of a mech. Or maybe you don't know you're a pilot of a mech yet. And like in many mecha anime, you'll fall through some floor and you'll find this old mech that prototype, woo. Just to like establish things and get your feet wet. But then after that, every episode you roll a dice, you roll a d6, and then whatever number you have pushes you forward that many episodes. And then you're telling the story from the end of the episode. So you go, here's the last thing that's happened in the last 5 episodes. If I was at episode 1 and I rolled a 4, those are all the things that happened. Here's what happened from when I was like, oh, hey, a mech. And now 5 episodes in, I'm like, okay, I'm in this space war and all these things have happened. And how do I feel about processing these really intense things that for the player, all just happened at once, like condensed time. And each one of the prompts that you have, because you roll a d6 to see what happened to your mech and what happened like to you as the player. Oh, it's how many episodes and then what happened to your mech. Something special happens. Your mech will be like, oh, it secretly had a weapon inside of it that popped out in the time of need, and was like, now you have dual wielding swords. In that situation, it does give you that highlight of, oh, I get to add something really cool, but it's also how much pressure was I under? What things what was I thinking about? What brought me into this situation where, when everything was on the line and I was about to lose, that this new thing came out, and how did that make me feel? And by the end of the game, there's only one other thing that's supposed to happen in the game, and I leave it open-ended because I want people to let their narrative play by the way it needs to, and it's that your character at some point has to realize that they aren't invincible. They have plot armor, and one of the other few defined things in the game is that the name of your mech suit is armor. So you're making a plot in your armor, plot armor. And so your character is going to realize that they can't die. And because of that, it's every time when they get into a situation where they might, something incredible will happen for them that will get them out of that situation. And once you know that you can't die, how does the context of all of the experiences that you've had up to this point change? And also, why is it that you can only do extraordinary things when you're pushed to the point of where someone normally would die? The last episode of the journal, when you roll up to it, is when your character will actually die because it's the end of the season. So they're being written off of the show, basically. And so it's the only time where you then transition back to like the first episode, where now you're looking towards the future. And you have all of this information in your pocket. You have all of these experiences. You go, okay, here's all the stuff that happened. Now that I know all of these things, how has this affected me? Who am I going to be? Like, there's some great shift that's about to happen as one would change up a season. How do I process my emotions? Being that most of human emotions are either withheld or brought out because of the fear of death.
I just love this game because there's so much you could do, and you could play it over and over again and have a totally different story. But it teaches people to kind of look at the structure too of a story and of a game, and also teaches you to, if you're not great at, a lot of players that you play with sometimes are not great at like thinking outside of the this is what's going to happen. Or if you're a game master and you plan your stuff too much, this is a great way to show you can rely on a couple of dice rolls on tables to tell a really great story, as long as you have like a good structure in mind and a sense of how story works. And that's why I think it's great for designers to play, because it gives you this a deeper understanding of story in a great way. When it was first described to me, I was like, oh, I don't watch a ton of anime that involves mech suits, so will I get this game? And I totally do. I totally feel for it. I think it's more universal than that. Obviously, from the way you describe it, it's about the story that you're telling in your armor, which I think is just incredible. So yeah, it's great. And I wonder, now that you have started to work on a lot of other people's games, especially games like D&D, right, which is the most popular currently RPG, kind of always is at some point. So what is it like for you to, obviously without breaking your NDAs, to work on other people's games, and what do you think you bring to the table when you're part of a bigger team like that?
Well, there's one thing that I think is fairly unique about me as a game designer, and it's that I look at everything as game design.
Oh,
Um,
sure.
and the way that, because games to me are very much so the, we're going to simulate something. We're human beings. We process things. We do it almost all through stories. Oh, I'm going to make this movie about this stuff that I think would be really cool. Um, Kids write about their fantasies about who they want to be when they grow up, or about what bugs do when you're not looking. Um, there's this huge range, and a lot of, like, I think kind of like everything is storytelling, like all human interaction. Like, we tell each other about our days all the time. And so when people are like, "Hey, tell me about how my game works towards the ideas and stuff that I want," a lot of it for me is going, well, what do you want for real though? Like, I can read your game and go, okay, I can see that you like these particular aspects of games and you think these mechanics are cool and that you respect this and that, but what's serving the experience that you want to have? Because right there is where you, as the person writing on the page have to then eliminate everything that doesn't serve your purpose. On the next level, it's then, how are people going to play your game? And that stands into not only how, like, it's written, the functionality of it all, like the core loop really functioning well, but how is it conveyed to people of different backgrounds? How is it pitched to them? Who are you speaking to? Where there are points in the game that things might be interrupted, halted, slowed, where people have to might make an adjustment or open up a book, all that sort of stuff. It's because at that point, it's like, wait, now how are people engaging in this game in like 17 different ways? Uh, with like WotC, uh, sometimes I'm just like, hey, y'all, um, you should make this product because this product is going to eliminate a problem that is general to the experience of playing the game, and it has nothing to do with the setting, and it has nothing to do with mechanics. It's just, this thing would help the situation of people playing. And being able to cut that off as like a thing that exists, an element that you can address. The way that I say it is a lot is that there are people who are experts in writing about the actual dungeons, the actual dragons, and then there are people like me who are like, okay, let's write about the experience of Dungeons and Dragons as my at least overall kind of focus. And you need both of those people.
You absolutely do. That's such an important part of game design, especially when a game gets as big as D&D does, right? Like 5th edition, they're trying to keep the game smaller. They're not releasing books every month and that kind of thing, but it's still a big RPG. There's a lot of information. There's a lot of books. You need 3 core books to start playing. It's like almost 900 pages of stuff. So I think having someone who can have that view is hugely important. More important in some respects than your lore, because if your game has great lore but can't be played, that can be difficult. That can be how many people love the lore of Shadowrun but have a really hard time playing Shadowrun, right?
Big one, yeah.
Yeah. It sounds like Shadowrun could use you as well, DC.
It's funny because I know the person who currently owns Shadowrun. I think I'm going to meet them soon, so I'll relay your message.
Yes, yeah, you could tell them this. Some guy with a podcast said that. That's cool, though. I love that, and I love to hear that you're doing that because I think so much about when I see you talking about things, you have that expansive view of things, and then you're able to zoom in and figure out not just what the problem is, but how to fix it, which is great.
Yeah, it's just the concept of switching perspectives constantly. I'm like thinking about who is being addressed at each moment. And a lot of the stuff that I've learned, and the reason I think these ways is because of the different like jobs that I've had and the different adaptations I've had to make personally, and like not even just super intense stuff, but just like hanging out with different groups of people. And like I was a esports commentator for a while, so like I had to be an analyst and be able to convey things that were happening really quickly in a very simple way and an exciting way. Like there's so much stuff that's overlapped. Like I play music. Music is just music is just fighting games, and then fighting games are just tabletop RPGs. And like everything is just connected in these really interesting ways. So like when when you come down to sit at a table and you go, okay, well everyone's about to sit down and play Dungeons and Dragons, people go, okay, in order to work out the mechanics of this game, let's look at how each of these individual people, like what they're choosing and what spells they like and their progressions and everything. But at the same time, you have to go over to the people and be like, hey, what's your story of your experience playing with these people or playing just the game in general? What things are you comfortable with? What are you not comfortable with? Where does your team like end up stuttering a little bit? Where it's like, okay, well, when you transition to combat, are we all flipping pages somewhere? Or like, where does someone pull out their phone? You know, like there's so many things that I'm thinking about. I'm like, we have so many things to address. They're all important, all going into, is the lore engaging, and is somebody not picking up in this moment something that is very important to the core dynamic of the game, of the group, of I don't know, the fun experience, you know. So
That is excellent, and it's excellent to hear. People are hiring you to work with them to get that view. I think is just hugely, hugely important. I feel like we're just scratching the surface of DC, so I hope that you'll come back and we can talk some more again. Especially because I'm sure once it's been revealed, whatever you may be working on with Wizards of the Coast and other people will probably want to talk about that. And once that's revealed, perhaps you'll have time to make something else for yourself, which we'll probably also want to talk about when that comes up. But as we're sort of winding down here, I'll ask you a few deep questions. What is one thing that you think game designers should think about? What is one thing you wish more people were talking about or thinking about when they make games?
my big thing is thinking about more than the world that you might understand. Because there's a degree to which, like, I'm a super liberal person on paper. Like, you find me on Twitter, I'm talking about the issues, at least from the perspective of my life, the people I care about, and what I can influence. But whenever I think about the stuff that I do in certain games, I think about the people who might not agree with my politics, who are going to play my games and like my mechanics. And I think about that a lot because when you're making a game, people end up making games for whoever they're thinking about when they make it. You only have the perspectives that you have. So when someone goes, "Oh, I made this thing and like it just didn't pop off and people aren't appreciating it as much," it's like, did you write for them? Did you have their perspectives in mind? Do you know what they like? Do you know what they don't like? Do you know where there are things that you can explore that can add levels of depth to even just the way you think about an approach? And it doesn't mean that you have to completely alter and switch up the things that you believe or whatever. That's like super far out there. Personal life, do your thing. But as a designer, uh, you have to know what people want more than what's being done. Everybody can see what's being done, but I was talking with another designer about this a couple of weeks ago. But it's like when you get an updated book from whatever designer, whatever company, you're sitting down and you're reading this thing that's fresh to you, and you're like, oh, I want to do this, and you can make something as interesting or as good as that. But that designer, at the moment that that book is released, is thinking, is actually already about to release something in like a year that they've completed today. That's going to be what you think is modern a year from now. And they're
Mhm.
thinking 6 months ahead of what's going to be interesting 2 years from now.
Yes. Wow, that is so true. Oh, wow.
Like if you're just paying attention to what's happening now and thinking about how can I be like what's happening now because that's what people are interested in, you are about 3 years behind.
Mhm.
Today
Mhm.
you are 3 years behind what's going to be going on. So the only way that you can bring forward something that is honest and unique and something that people are going to be interested in is to be completely like vulnerable in your work and give people something that they can't get anywhere else, which is you, a person. Um, we could have the best designers in the world come together and make a game off of the same exact prompt that you do, and the games will be completely different. And I will probably love both of those games just because you have something to say that's really unique, but you need to be able to see how you exist in the sphere of people who are playing your games, which could be anyone. So, gotta at least be able to bounce that around a little bit and see like it's like Mutants in the Night. Like the majority of us are
Mhm.
all sitting in this like cut off section of the world trying to be creators, the most broke people in the world. Uh, and we do have all these things that are wildly different about us, but we have things that connect us as well. And as long as you're respecting people coming over to the table and being like, oh, this is what y'all are doing over here. Here are the things that we have in common. Here are things that you like that I never would have thought of. Here's things that I have inside of me that I didn't think people would want me to share. So really just gotta like get out there and understand like society at least in a bit, even if it's just small pockets.
Totally agree. That is a great way to put it and a great way to think about it, especially thinking ahead, but thinking ahead with you. You know, who are you? What are you bringing to the table? And being honest about what you can put into your work. You know, I think that's a lot of people talk about writing what you want to write, right? And I think that's important to say, okay, I want to write this thing, but then to take a step back and say, why and how and who is this for and what if it's for someone else, and talking with other creators about your work I think is hugely important too, to get other perspectives. Can really help, which is why, you know, people have hired you and people hire other freelancers to talk with them and get unique perspectives, so that you're not writing the same thing over and over again, which I think is great. This has been an incredible chat, DC. If people want to learn more about you and hear these amazing thoughts day in and day out, where should they go and what should they do?
You can follow me on Twitter at Dungeon Commander with no E in Commander. Um, I will talk about everything that we have talked about here today and some more. And if you want to check out my games, you can go to Dungeon Commander with no E in Commander .itch.io. That's ITCH.io.
Excellent. Well, it has been awesome having you here. And like I said, please come back. It's taking every fiber of my being to not try to grill you about what you're doing with WotC right now. So,
Spring 2020, there's going to be something released, I'm pretty sure, that I think has everything that I've worked on up until what I'm working on right now. So the majority of the stuff I'll be able to talk about. One thing is really dope, and like, you'll want to talk about.
Well, that settles it. We'll definitely have you back on the podcast. You know, probably, hopefully before spring 2020, but then in spring 2020 as well to talk about it. So, thank you so much for stopping by and chatting with me, DC.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me. It's been a long time coming.
What a great conversation with DC. We will definitely have to have them back. People, if you want to financially support Tabletop Babble, head on over to patreon.com/Introcaso. That's patreon.com/Introcaso, where you can go ahead and set up a recurring monthly donation. $1 will give you a survey that will help you vote on upcoming topics for this show, Tabletop Babble. Babble, and what I'm doing over on my blog, World Builder blog. $5 or more gets you more content, stuff that I am making, live Q&A chats, and there's also content levels where I am writing 5th edition content, game design advice, GM advice, that kind of thing too. So go check it out at patreon.com/Introcaso. If you're already doing that, thank you so much. I really, really appreciated it. It's blown me away to see that people care enough to throw some of their hard-earned coins my way. So really, thank you so much. And hey, there's another way to support the show, and it's totally free. Head on over to iTunes, leave us a 5-star review. You will help other people find the show. Seriously, it is super, super helpful. Plus, if you leave us a 5-star review, I will read it out loud and credit the person who left it. You can make me say anything you want. A good 5-star review might be entitled "My Words All Up in His Mouth," which is from Amfrom 20. Amfrom 20. My words all up in his mouth says, "One of the good gaming pods out there, James is a delightful and engaged host and always brings on interesting guests. He also sold his soul to Dispater for this review, and Dispater isn't giving his soul back anytime soon." Oh, my dog did not like that. It's okay, Lilo. It's okay. Well, thank you so much, AmFam20, for leaving this review. I really, really appreciate it. And people, please go help other people find us. If you've already left us a review, thank you from the bottom of my heart. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. All right, you can find me on Twitter at James Introcaso. That's at JamesIntrocaso. Also, check out my blog, worldbuilderblog.com, for all the game design stuff that I am doing and lots of free resources for your tabletop RPGs. Tabletop Babble is a show on the Don't Split the Podcast Network. Thanks to Rudy Basso for founding it with me. Our theme music, which you're listening to right now, was provided by Battle Bards. Don't forget, RPGs are like sex. Hey everybody, just wanted to let you know the episode of Tabletop Babble you just listened to was brought to you by D&D Beyond. D&D Beyond are the makers of the digital tool set and companion for Dungeons and Dragons. You can use D&D Beyond to build characters, track campaigns, run adventures, and do so much more. D&D Beyond has lots of awesome content for free, like the D&D basic rules, other stuff that you can get online, articles from great writers like James J. Hake, and videos from Todd Kenrick. Plus, you can put your own stuff on there. That's right, you can put homebrew content on D&D Beyond, share it, have other people use it. It is pretty cool. The incredible D&D Beyond team is always updating the site with new features and improvements, like an encounter builder. What? That's crazy. Go check it out. D&D Beyond has made my play experience better, and it's made my design experience better. It's great to have everything right there at my fingertips as I'm working on an adventure or doing prep for my game. I can just bada bing, bada boom, there it is. When I'm running a game, oh, you need to know the grapple rules? Boom, here they are. Go check it out right now, dndbeyond.com.